Okay, so welcome to Eastern Planning Committee for BCP Council on the Thursday, 3rd of July 2025. If we can do housekeeping first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So moving to item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies for this meeting from Councillor Lawrence Williams and Councillor Michael Tarling, and Councillor Bernadette Nanaveau is substituting for Councillor Tarling for this meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so if I can introduce myself, so I'm Councillor Paul Hilliard, I'm the chair of this committee, and I'd ask other people to likewise introduce.
Use that one, can't I? Yeah. And I'm Marion Le Pedvin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands, and I'm Vice Chair of this committee.
I'm Gillian Martin, Councillor for Boscombe West.
Matt Gillett, Councillor for Talbot Woods.
Bernadette Nanaveau, Councillor for East Southbourne and Tuckton.
Councillor Joe Clements, Penhill Ward.
Toby Slade, Musgrave and Stratton Park.
Councillor David Flagg, Burton Grange Ward.
Peter Walters, Senior Planning Officer and Case Officer for this application.
Sanju Timana, Team Leader, Strategic Applications.
Simon Gould, Development Management Manager.
Thank you for that. And we're also joined by Claire Johnson, who will be the Democratic Services Officer. Thank you. Okay, item 3 is declarations of interest from members. Anything to declare at this time? No, take that as none. Then moving to confirmation of minutes from the meeting of the 5th of June 2025. So we've had these for a few weeks. Anything to flag? Everyone happy with those?
Yeah,
all accepted. I will sign those. So number 5 is public issues. So after the officer presentation, we will hear any public speakers by any ward councillors who wish to speak. And that moves us straight on to item 6. 6A is 3133 Warncliffe Road, Christchurch. Mr. Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for it all to appear on the screen. Lovely. Thank you. So this is an application at number 31 to 33 Warncliffe Road in Christchurch for the demolition of the existing buildings and erection of 2 apartment blocks with associated parking and landscaping. Application reference 8//24/0623/FUL. It's been brought to committee at the request of the head of planning, who considers that the issues and matters are finely balanced. Just a quick update sheet. Hopefully you'll all have seen the addendum sheet. Apologies, there was a typo in paragraph 1 in terms of the number of car parking spaces. The correct number is 31 spaces. Sorry.
Just in terms of the member who's just arrived, are we able to start again to make sure that they can vote on that?
Yes, I think if you can come to the table as soon as you can, and Peter, just for clarity, if you can start the presentation. Sure. I think she came in through the door. Thank you. So just to confirm, Councillor Dr. Felicity Rice has joined the meeting. Okay, Peter, thanks.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Yes, so this application at 31 to 33 Warncliffe Road in Christchurch, the demolition of existing buildings and erection of 2 apartment blocks with associated parking and landscaping. And this application has been brought to the committee at the request of the head of planning, who considers that the matters in this application are finely balanced. So just as I was saying, just one small update based on a typo in the report in terms of the number of parking spaces, but just to make it clear that the highways comments that you've seen are based on the correct number of parking spaces. It was just a typing error in the report. Apologies for that, but it doesn't have any bearing on the advice given or the recommendation made. So moving on to the site. The site is on the coast in Highcliffe, in the far east part of the BCP Council area. Warncliffe Road is to the north of the site, and to the south you have the cliff and coastline. Just a few photographs of the site. So the site comprises of 2 detached dwellings that are at present completely independent sites. So the proposal would amalgamate the 2 plots into one larger plot. So this is looking from Warncliffe Road. At the moment, as I said, you've got 2 detached dwellings, mid-20th century construction. You can also see, which isn't so clear from the other photographs, that there are some mature trees here that are the subject of a tree preservation order. Street scene is evolving. The area was historically characterised with larger detached residential properties, but over the last 10 to 20 years or so, that's changed quite significantly, particularly on the southern side of Warncliffe Road. So the 2 examples that I've shown there are either side to the east and west of the application site. It should be noted there has always been a degree of variance in the street scene, because at the further to the west, which I haven't shown, are mid-20th century blocks of flats. So going to the rear now, looking at the 2 properties, they both have large extensive gardens, and you can see that at the moment they're largely laid to lawn, and that's looking to the rear of the site. Beyond the rear of the site, just about here, if you can see my cursor, is a public footpath that runs beyond the boundary of the site. A couple more to show the relationship of those neighbouring properties. You can see that the building line of the neighbouring properties projects further back. They all have balconies with privacy screens on the flats to the west, and some, although not quite as many, to the properties to the east. Largely speaking, there isn't much in the way of fenestration on either, particularly the neighbouring property to the east. You've got the high level roof lights, and that's about it. To the west, there are a few windows there. 2 out of the 3 of those are obscurely glazed because they serve bathrooms. And so I should say you've got the roof lights there as well. So the proposal is to demolish those 2 existing dwellings, erect 2 apartment blocks with the associated parking and landscaping. And the breakdown of the mix there would be to have 1 one-bedroom unit, 11 2-bedroom units, and 7 3-bedroom units. And I just realised I still haven't updated that slide. Apologies, I'd forgotten that was there. But that's 31 parking spaces, which includes 4 visitor spaces and 4 to 6 bicycle spaces. So the site has been the subject of planning application in the past, and so the scheme that you're seeing today is part of an iterative process. I'll show you a few slides of what was refused so you can see where we started with this site and where we've come to. So we had this application, and then following the refusal of, I had the previous application. Following the refusal of that, the applicant entered into the pre-application process to kind of steer what we were looking for, and the pre-application process took us to where we are today. So starting with what was previously refused, the application was for a single large block, so that would have been covering both of the sites. You can see it goes up to 4 stories, very contemporary design, significant scale and bulk, and to be honest, there's no comparable within the street scene to that at all. So officers had significant concerns when that was submitted, and just showing you some side elevations as well. So that scheme was refused because of the impact on the character of the area. The scheme would have also resulted in the loss of the protected trees that I've mentioned at the front of the site as well, which was also another reason that it was refused. So moving on to where we are now, following the refusal of that and then that iterative pre-application process, What the applicant has come back with is a scheme for 2 independent apartment blocks, so you don't have that same bulk and mass on the site. It's broken up. You have a central courtyard as well to provide access and an amenity feature, as well as the rear gardens. The design is still contemporary, but it takes more cues from some more traditional forms found in the area with dual pitched roofs. And looking back at the photos of what neighbours it, they've clearly taken the design cues from what's found within the street scene. So these are side elevations. Because of the relationship to neighbouring properties, there are fewer windows on the side elevations to reduce the vision, to reduce the risk of overlooking. It's always hard to tell with these elevations, but these are actually stepped back so they're further away and they don't look onto neighbouring windows directly. And again, it's always hard to tell from a 2D elevation or drawing, but actually the windows are kind of inset so they don't look directly on to the neighbouring property. And then the central courtyard would provide the access point to both the blocks of flats. So you've got some a piece of art in the middle, and you've got your access points here. So moving to the site plan, I will get into more detailed floor plans in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of demonstrate the amount of amenity space that is available to future occupiers, and it gives you an overall idea of the layout. But if I move forward to the ground floor plan, that's a little clearer. So you have, as I said, access through the central courtyard, leading to the access points to the 2 buildings here, with lifts going up to the upper floors as well as stairwells. One of the concerns raised with the previous scheme was that some of the flats would have been single aspect, so would have made it more difficult to get adequate ventilation and what have you. And the applicant has sought to address that, so all the flats have at least 2 aspects on them. So they've worked to overcome that previous concern that was raised by officers. Vehicular access comes from the side. I'll show you the plans in a minute, but the car parking would be in the basement, so I'll come back to that in more detail, but just from the ground floor plan, the vehicular access would be there, and this is the root protection area of the trees. There would be a couple of visitor spaces and 1 disabled space as well. So I won't spend too much time on the floor plans because they're quite similar, other than the upper floors are where the 3-bed flats are found. But you can see there that they all have dual aspect, as I've mentioned previously. All of the flats either have balconies or ground floor patio terrace space. So you either have direct access out onto the amenity space, or you have your own private balcony. So second floor plan, again, kind of similar. So moving to the basement, so this is where the car parking would be. Access would be achieved by 2 independent running car lifts. The highways team are happy with this approach, especially as you have 2 car lifts, so that if one is out of order, it still means that there's access to the basement car park. There's also self-contained cycle storage as well on the site, which again has its own independent lifts, so bicycles aren't having to access the car park at the same time as cars. And then the roof plan, as you can see, is a mix of pitched and flat roof, but what's appreciated from the street scene are the pitched roofs primarily, which is considered to be more in keeping with the character of the area. So I've got an indicative street scene. The main thing to draw your attention to here is the relative heights of the buildings and scale of massing. And as you can see, it's very similar. Officers are much more comfortable with its setting within the street scene, especially when you consider the scheme that came forward previously. Officers consider that this would sit more comfortably within its street scene. So turning to some of the material considerations that officers have assessed, impact on the amenity of the neighbouring residents. I mentioned that the first floor and above flats are going to have balconies. all the balconies would have privacy screening to ensure that neighbouring amenity is appropriately protected. And as you saw from the photographs that I've taken, the neighbouring properties have done the same, so it's very much the standard approach now. And nearly all the windows on the east and west elevations, of which there are a few, are obscurely glazed. By and large, where it's been possible, the windows serve bathrooms and what have you. There are a couple. There's one that isn't, that serves a bedroom. However, when you look across the neighbouring property, you don't have direct overlooking. You're kind of looking at an obscure angle. I mentioned the height of the buildings being comparable to neighbouring buildings, so officers don't consider that this proposal would have an overbearing impact on the residents of the neighbouring properties. I talked about the impact on future occupiers. I jumped ahead of myself a bit there, apologies, but yeah, just to reiterate that all of them would have access either directly into the amenity space or would have their own balcony. So officers consider that to be an acceptable approach. Again, car parking, car parking provisions considered to be sufficient. Apologies, I updated the report and missed that I'd used 37 in the presentation. I do apologise. But as I said, highways are happy with the car parking provision, happy with this approach, and it's considered to be acceptable. Mentioned that there are protected trees on site. They do contribute to the amenity value of the area as well as being protected in their own right. The arboricultural officer wanted to see that services had been placed where possible to avoid most of the root protection area of the trees, and that's been done. So officers considered that that the proposal would be acceptable, subject to the submission of a detailed arboricultural method statement. But taking other matters, no affordable housing is proposed. The applicant submitted a viability report that was independently verified by the District Valuation Service, who concluded that affordable housing would not be achievable on the site. The site's 43 metres from the cliff edge, so officers have had discussions with our engineers. They're happy that the stability of the cliff wouldn't be undermined by the development. They would like to see more details of how the basement would be built out, but just to be clear, they're not concerned that it can be done, but they want to make sure that we have control over the methodology to make sure it's done the correct way. Biodiversity, 10% biodiversity net gain on site will be achieved, and that will be because of the amenity space at the back. There is scope to increase the biodiversity net gain. They're also retaining as many key habitats as possible to avoid reducing the amount of existing habitats on site, which means they would then have more to find. In terms of mitigation for protected sites, a unilateral undertaking has been agreed for heathlands payments, standard heathlands payments. Officers are proposing the standard condition for phosphate mitigation. We've had the calculator from them, and there would also be a condition requiring a mitigation scheme to be submitted to mitigate the impact on the New Forest Special Protection Area, Special Area of Conservation and Ramsar site. In terms of waste collection, private collection has been proposed. The waste team had advised that they would prefer to see a bin store within 10 metres of the road. That isn't achievable here without significantly impeding the root protection area of the trees, and therefore private collections have been used elsewhere, and officers consider that that's a suitable alternative under the circumstances. And finally, in terms of drainage, because of the proximity to the cliffs, soakways are obviously inappropriate. The applicant has proposed an attenuation system, which the lead local flood authority are happy with in principle, but it would be subject to a condition to provide further details if the application is approved. So, in conclusion, officers do consider that the proposals are acceptable. The 5-year housing land supply position is material in this, although I would say that officers consider the application to be acceptable as submitted. So officers recommend that the application is approved subject to the conditions set out in the report and the Section 106 6 agreement for the provision of the standard payment for heathlands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. So now we'll move to speakers. So first of all, it's the applicant supporter, Mr. Moy.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. I'm speaking on behalf of Berry and Knight, the applicants. They're very pleased to see the application has been recommended for approval, and it's hoped that you're able to support the officer's recommendation. As detailed in the committee report and from the slides that you've seen from the presentation, there's a previous application for the site which sought consent for 23 apartments within a single block. This application was refused, and the applicants revisited their approach to developing the site, seeking pre-application advice from the council. The advice provided through the pre-application process was followed and has informed this revised application. It's of note that the application for 23 apartments attracted 225 objections. The application before you this morning has 9 objections from 6 households, together with a letter of support. The proposal, as you've heard, is for 19 apartments in 2 separate blocks. The apartments are provided across a range of sizes, being 1, 2 and 3 bedroom units, all of which exceed the space standards set out in national guidance. We understand that there has been some criticism that the proposal will be providing luxury flats. The development will replace 2 large properties and provide an opportunity for those wishing to downsize and remain in the local area, freeing up housing stock. For way of context, I appreciate it's not part of this application, but Berry and Knight, as the applicants, also have an application within Christchurch for 104 units, primarily family housing, which would deliver 40% affordable. So across their portfolio, there's a range of apartments, hopefully coming forward together with family housing. As set out in the case officer report, the tilted balance applies in your consideration of this application, with the proposal providing 17 additional residential properties in a highly sustainable location. The committee report and officer's presentation has clearly set out how the design of the proposal complements the existing street scene, is in keeping with the evolving character of the area, and will not appear as an incongruous addition. I'd like to highlight the separation distances between the proposal and neighbouring properties, and the separation distance between the blocks themselves are greater than those gaps that exist within Warncliffe Road at present. With regard to proposed site coverage in relation to built form, this is comparable to, and in some instances lower than existing properties in Warncliffe Road. The proposal has a site coverage 25% and the neighbouring apartment being 29%. As you've heard, the proposal will not impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties, with no harmful overlooking occurring and no disruption to daylight currently enjoyed by those neighbouring units. As you'll be aware, the Council's Cliff Stability team have not raised an objection. There's no objection from the Highways Officer, no objection from Dorset Police. The 3 mature pines are retained, and this is supported by your Tree and Landscape Officer. There's no objection from the Drainage team and no objection from the Lead Local Flood Authority. Amended plans have been submitted which have addressed the comments from the Urban Design Officer. The applicants attended a meeting with local residents and the Parish Council to understand any concerns there may be with this proposal. The outcome of the meeting being that they are happy to provide a construction management plan which details how the construction process will be managed to ensure there's minimal disruption for local residents. As you've heard, there will be a 10% increase in biodiversity net gain which can be provided on site. All the concerns associated with the earlier application have been addressed. All technical matters, for example cliff stability, are agreed with no objections being raised. The proposal is an appropriate design and scale, important trees are retained, and there will be no impact on neighbouring properties. I trust you're able to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moy. Now, Ward Councillor Andy Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just made some notes while Mr. Moyer was speaking and also the planning officer. So I'll follow my notes and my pre-prepared stuff. So first of all, yes, can I also thank you for the opportunity of speaking? And can I actually first of all say I have a good deal of respect for the developers here. They are a good local firm based in Highcliffe, and having been based there, I think, for many years, and they are inextricably tied up with the village's more recent history. personally, I lived in a Holborn house for many years. In fact, I moved into that house 50 years ago this week, believe it or not. And a member of my family still lives in a Holborn house. So I'm very familiar with their developments. And indeed, Mr. Moyer just referenced the proposal, which I guess will be coming before you later in the year, for the 104 homes on Holborn Farm Estate. Not in my ward, but in the Highcliffe and Watford parish. As he rightly pointed out, there's some family homes there and some affordable homes, all of which are needed in our community. So let me just put that as a little bit of context. However, given the company's profile and background and history, I don't really understand why the company is keen to push this luxury flat business and get themselves into the luxury flat market, because it doesn't seem to fit with their profile. And so I was always somewhat surprised, particularly going back to the first application, that they decided to dip their toe in the water of this market. I firmly believe that the 19 luxury apartments is overdevelopment on these two sites. And as again has been referenced, the two applications have been the subject of two public meetings, one for the first one and one for the second one, at which directors of the company kindly attended. I don't believe the proposal meets any market demand, given the very obvious oversupply of luxury flats in Highcliffe, as opposed to the family homes and affordable homes that we referenced earlier. Highcliffe is saturated with luxury flats. You only have to drive down the Livingstone Road from, for example, the entrance to the castle up to where the Lord Bute is, to see that we've had loads of new blocks of flats built there over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And driving by at night, you can see that most of the lights are switched off there, i.e. telling us that a lot of those properties are indeed second homes. So I'm not sure we need any more of those, quite frankly, in Highcliffe. What we need is, we don't need second homes, we need family homes and affordable homes. Mr. Moyer mentioned and actually the planning officer mentioned the original proposal. And I've got to say, and I did say this at the public meeting and to the directors, I was very disappointed that the company, being a local company, decided to essentially really push the envelope over the cliff, if you like, by their original proposal. And you can see from the images there, the CGIs, just how huge that proposal was for 23 flats and 4 stories. And of course, you know, we all know that's a tactic that developers use. They push it, they put something through that is clearly going to be unacceptable, and then they can come back and say, well, we've listened and we've reduced it. In my view, that they've reduced it, but in my view, not enough. The next, for example, you could see again in the later CGI, you could see Elysium to the left, which is a site which is actually a little bit bigger, I think, than number 33, and it only has 5 apartments in it. So I think that gives a little bit of context. And also, it was interesting when we were looking at that CGI, I kind of felt, just looking at that the new proposal, albeit that it's 2 blocks, is actually quite overbearing and quite dominant in terms of the property on the left looking from the street and the property on the right, which I think is, I can't remember the name of that, Morella, I think it is. So that's my sort of take on the sort of the dominant nature of it, for example. I also have real concerns about the excavation of the cliff. We've had so much of that cliff excavated in the last few years for underground car parking. And obviously I accept that's happened elsewhere, but I think not on this scale. I don't think there's anything as big as this in terms of the underground excavation. And I think, frankly, at some point we've got to stop excavating the cliff. You know, it's a really sensitive part of our coastline, and the cumulative effect of this excavation has got to be damaging for the fragile natural environment. The cliffs in that area are all triple SIs, and they all have a lot of complicated infrastructure in there to stop the cliffs falling away, as they have just done down the road in Barton-on-Sea. If you've ever stood on the cliff top there, you can see the Barton-on-Sea one's falling away, and our one's quite stable. I do think actually this council and previous councils and councillors will come to rue the day that they allowed such a large amount of the cliff to be excavated. I also have concerns about the Monterey pine at the front. It's a magnificent tree. I mean, I noted that the tree officer said there was a slight concern about the development encroaching on the root protection area. I actually visited the site again last night to have a look. I actually think it's much more than a slight concern. It's a really serious concern over one of the most important trees in Highcliffe. I know we've got lots of trees in Highcliffe, but this is a really important one. And so I really feel that's a problem. Yeah, so I know you want me to wind up, Chair. So more second homes are not required in Highcliffe. We don't need them. Let me just finally say, though, also noting that the parish council say in their view, little has changed in this new application. Can I say that I do understand that the principle of flats development have been established along Warncliffe Road. I'm not arguing about that. I'm simply saying that in my view, this proposal is too big, it's still too big, and we need something a little bit more modest that fits in with the area, and I don't think this does. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate I ran over time quite a lot.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Councillor Martin. So, Mr. Waters, is there anything you wanted to come back on from those two speakers to clarify?
Thank you, Chair. I think picking up the point on the cliff, officers have to be guided by our engineers who are advising that there wouldn't be any impact on the stability of the cliff. So I would defer to their expertise in the matter, as it were. In terms of them being used as second homes, there's no real scope in the local plan to prevent how the flats would be sold, and unfortunately that is beyond the scope of our, of what we can do, because there's no planning policy that would support us reducing them on the basis that they might be bought as second homes, and we don't know. Although I appreciate the councillor's point, I think those are probably the two things that I would wish to come back on in the first instance, but I'm sure there'll be more to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. So open to the committee questions. Councillor Rice.
Can you just go back over the aspect of affordable housing and why that's not possible on this site?
Sorry, yes, Mr. Waters. Thank you. Yeah, so the applicant has submitted viability information advising that the provision of affordable housing would not be possible in terms of the financial viability of developing the site. And as is the process that we follow in all of these situations, the applicant has to agree to allow that viability information to be assessed by an independent district valuation service. So it goes to them, who are completely independent of the council and the developer, and give us some advice on whether what they're saying is correct financially or not. And the advice that we've had from them is that if policy compliant affordable housing was to be provided, or indeed any affordable housing, then that would mean that the site would become financially unviable to develop. And so the local plan policy states that where that information has been provided and where it's been independently verified and confirmed, then the applicant is not required to provide affordable housing. And so they've complied with the requirements of the planning policy to provide the evidence that they're not providing it. And that's why officers are not raising an objection on those grounds.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Rice? Councillor Martin.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I've got several questions. I wasn't quite clear about the parking arrangements for service vehicles and disabled parking. Is that at ground level, not using the lift? Because I was thinking as well that the underground spaces are quite crushed. If somebody who's disabled went to live there permanently, they might not be able to use the underground parking. And so are there spaces at ground level for disabled people and for parking, for Deliveroo and things? How many spaces for that?
I think Mr. Waters is just finding that picture.
Yeah. I just wasn't clear, sorry.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, so apologies, I don't think I discussed in enough detail, but there would be parking provision here, which is on the ground floor, or on the ground level, I should say, sorry. So you'd have disabled parking and an additional parking space, and that would also allow for deliveries as well. So that is all above ground. and not in the basement.
Yeah, I'm also a bit wary of underground parking as well. I was going to ask about ventilation because you've got like a lot of parking space under there, and also the lift going in. You know, if the lift broke with somebody in there, is it sufficiently? I'm thinking about carbon monoxide. You know, it's you know, and just the fumes generally.
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Chair. So our highways team haven't raised any concerns about this approach. I can't tell you exactly where ventilation would be provided, but I think if it was a concern, then I can't see any reason that we couldn't ask for further details. So I'm just looking at.
And I think this is where the fire authority was saying about covering big building regs, so they would be involved in that process.
Just concerned in case there was a power cut or something, and you know what I mean. You can't because it's entirely underground. You know, lighting and ventilation are quite important, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, we've just been conferring. We think actually this would be a building regulations matter that they would have to ensure that they provide that at the building regulations stage. So therefore, it would sit outside of the planning process, but it is something that absolutely would have to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Gillett.
So on the back of the site, there's two access points onto the cliff top, and the councillor mentioned it's a triple SI, although I think when I looked at the maps, I thought it might be an SNCI, but I might be no good at maps. Maybe you can clarify on that. But in looking at that point, it's you've got a sort of like a heathy kind of area. I mean, it essentially looks like exactly the sort of place where a sand lizard might like to live. So and with the site, obviously we're increasing the volume of people that would go onto that area. How, first of all, is it a triple SNCI, or am I wrong on both of those counts? And how is the impact of that being assessed?
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just double checking the constraints as to whether it is either a triple SI or SNCI. I'm not aware of it having the designation of either, but I'm just double checking that. There is, in terms of general biodiversity constraints, a biodiversity plan has been submitted, and the biodiversity officer has seen that and is satisfied with the approach. There's some of the habitat would be given over for biodiversity net gains. So although it would still fall within the larger plot, it wouldn't really be used on a day-to-day by people. So you'd have an area to lawn and then have an area that's given aside for that. I'm trying to find something to check the.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Yeah. Should I get our GIS open?
Okay, so if we're looking into the classification, if there's any other questions, Councillor Salmon?
So I think there are a couple of things I've got questions on. So we've got loads of conditions that are already suggested by the officer if we were to grant. But I think all of us have probably done tons of casework on properties like this with the bins and issues where, the council won't collect the bins, they're overflowing, all of those problems. Now I can't see that being addressed by one of the conditions here, although it is raised as an objection from waste management. I can see, I might be misreading it, but I think the only condition is a waste management plan for while construction is taking place. But I wonder if it's possible for us, when it comes to the debate, to have an additional condition that a waste management plan for post-construction that will handle the fact that the council can't get the bins from there. I wonder if we can do a condition on that. And then I think there was also something about the lack of a soakaway that was raised by the tree officer. And I wonder if similarly, if that is another condition we can put on. Because I think on the tilted balance, doesn't matter who's going to live there. If it's Jeff Bezos, one day a year, we can't take that into account, can we? Those are my only questions.
Mr. Waters?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got so many tabs open, I can't find the report here to remind you of the conditions, so bear with me. In terms of the soakaway, there was discussion from the arboricultural officer about a concern of soakaways into root protection area. We can't use soakaways here in any event because of the proximity to the cliff. Obviously, what you don't want to do is allow water to percolate into the soil system that then might start to undermine the geology. So the drainage solution here has to be attenuation. That attenuation tank would be situated to the southern side, so in the rear garden, effectively away from those trees. So surface water is collected in the tank and then is slowly released at an agreed rate into the sewer, because a soakaway is just not an appropriate drainage option here. But the arboricultural officer did raise concerns that if there was a soakaway, would it impede on the root protection area? The answer is there won't be a soakaway. In terms of the condition for the waste, condition 10. So the condition reads, no part of the development hereby permitted should be occupied unless a refuse management plan has been first submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. That shall in particular include details of the private contractor who will initially be responsible for the collection of household waste from the development, including how that waste will be collected, taken away and how frequently. Details of any management company to be set up that will operate such arrangements, and measures to secure the ongoing future private collection of all household waste from the development, including arrangements for the collection of waste if no private contractor is available at any time in the future. The approved refuse management plan shall be accorded with at all times. No bins should be stored in the open or any collection point shall any of the approved plans relating to the development hereby permitted apart from on the day of collection. So the idea of that condition is to ensure an initial and an ongoing plan is in place to ensure that waste is collected. So it wouldn't just cover there is a proposed condition for a construction management plan during the construction process to ensure that the amenity of the local residents is protected, but there is a separate condition number 10, in relation to refuse management plan.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Councillor Salmon.
So I'm being a bit thick then in the way this report is written. So when I'm looking to see the conditions, I scroll down to where it says recommendation, and then we've got conditions, and then we've got numbered conditions. But are there additional conditions aside from those that are found elsewhere in the report? So the one you've just given on waste collection is at point 78.
So the report is 78, but at the bottom it's condition 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've just missed it. Thank you.
Condition 10 is what's just been read out.
Okay, Councillor Clements.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question about the tree roots. The ward councillor mentioned or had concerns regarding the effect on the tree roots of the development. But it was my understanding from the case officer's report that the only threat to the tree roots was from the store for the refuse collection area. And that's the reason that they decided not to put it there, so that they wouldn't destroy or have any detrimental impact on the tree roots. I just would like clarification, please.
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the comments from the waste management team would be a preference to see a collection point within 10 metres of the highway. The problem with doing that on this particular site is that's where the protected trees are. And so officers have kind of looked at everything in the round in the balance and concluded that the best way forward here would be not to require a separate bin store. There's, other sites along Warncliffe Road do have bin stores at the front of the site, but they don't have the protected trees.
Thanks. So is that the only threat to the tree roots, not any other part of the development?
No, the parking area will need to be designed properly to ensure that it doesn't damage the tree roots, as will the services. Now, the services have been indicated on the plan, so as long as that plan's adhered to, that should be okay. However, that is the reason that officers are recommending a full arboricultural method statement to be provided to ensure that that isn't an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pedwin?
Thank you. Mine's I hope for a very easy one to answer. I can identify why the car lift is very easily on the plans. Where's the cycle lift and what's the access to it?
Thank you. It is. Well, let me get the cursor back up on the screen. So, where are we? They are over here, I believe. I can't read this from here. It's these ones over here. There are two separate lifts again. No, I beg your pardon. Sorry. No. The centre of the main lifts coming down through the building from the flats. The cycle lifts are up here, so they're independent. And again, you've got two running side by side. So again, highways were happier with that approach because if one is undergoing servicing or what have you, then another one is still available.
So there would be access through the courtyard, is that right? Because that's surely the rear of the property.
Have I misread the plans?
How about these? These are bikes, right? This one has for bikes and the other one, so it's the main.
Yeah, apologies. I'll go back to the. No, I apologise. That it is connected to the main lifts, so it would be access through the central courtyard.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Rice?
Yeah, are you able to tell me how much parking is required for this site? I see that there's more than one vehicle per unit provided.
So, Mr. Waters, what would the minimum be required?
So it depends on the size of the units. So some of these are 3-bedroom units, so therefore they require 2 parking spaces. And so my understanding is that this is meeting that requirement. I don't believe there's an over provision, not a significant over provision of parking.
But they don't have to provide 2 parking spaces, do they? They're allowed to provide 2 parking spaces and maybe can't provide more, but they don't have to provide 2 parking spaces.
Mr. Gould, do you know?
I would have thought they could provide no parking, couldn't they?
I'm just pulling up the comments from Sorry, bear with me, we're just double checking this.
Mr. Gould, did you find the answer on the designation of the? Thank you.
Yes, Chair. So we've had a look on the map, and basically the area down on the beach and to the south of that, going out towards the water, is a special protection area. But to the north of that, including the beach and then the cliff face leading up to the rear boundary of the site, is not designated. And Chair, if I can also just pick up on another point that was raised about ventilation in the basement car park. The plan on the screen at the moment might not be very clear, but towards the sort of top left and top right hand corners in the basement, you'll see there's areas that are shaded green. In the white section of wall on the top left hand side, it actually annotates, but you can't read it very well there. Vent louvers, and the same would apply to the top right hand corner. Now, the issue is actually a building control matter, but it would either be ventilated by natural ventilation, so those louvers, for instance, would work with the lift area to create a through draft, or if the calculations show that that's not sufficient, then they would have to have a mechanical solution to that.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Gillett.
Just to clarify, so I went onto the magic map, and I saw the marine designations between the properties. There's a banding of like a light green banding, and then to the left hand side there's a dark green banding. What are those designations then, if they're not SNCI and SSSI?
I don't have the benefit of looking at the map that you're looking at, and then neither does everyone else in the room, Councillor.
I can show you my computer. I'm on the magic map. So if you go to the magic map, yeah,
yeah. What is the magic map?
It's called
DEFRA's map, and it tells you all the designations of the different areas for. It's not a magic map. It's just a map.
Okay. So I think the officers will just have a quick look at that. But Mr. Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may come back on the parking provision, I've got the answer now. Apologies. 26 is the minimum in compliance with the parking SPD. We're in parking zone D, and so they should be providing 26 spaces. And that is, as I said, because of the different sizes of units, and because we're in parking zone D, i.e. not right in the centre, the parking provision required increases accordingly. So they've provided the minimum requirement to meet the parking SPD.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, but again, we're just
But we move on and we'll come.
right. Okay. For me, it was just about the access and egress from the site. So obviously, 31 spaces, 2 access lifts at different times of the day. Potentially, all 31 cars could be wanting to leave at the same time. It's near a junction. The access point is near a junction. Have the highways considered all these points, and that they still think that is acceptable? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, I can read you the comments from the highways officer if it would help in terms of access. And they've commented that the vehicular access arrangements to the site are acceptable with sufficient pedestrian and vehicular visibility. The lifts are acceptable and set back sufficiently to allow for any cars waiting to do so to be clear of the public highway. And the fact that they're using separate car and cycle lifts is also welcome, so you don't have a conflict. So the highways officers do consider, because if I refer back to the plan, you can see the access to the car park isn't immediately from the highway. So the highways officers considered it's unlikely that there's going to be so many cars waiting to access the car park at the same time that it would back up onto the highway. So they're comfortable with that amount of waiting area, if you like, for want of a better way of putting it, while you wait to access the lifts.
Thank you. Okay, so we just wait for the designation confirmation. Councillor Navarro, sorry.
I have just one question while we're waiting. Item number 12, page 39, it says no part of the development hereby permitted shall be commenced, including any site clearance, etc., until the following conditions are met. And then it lists a whole lot of conditions. Who actually enforces these conditions? Is it the council, or is it a building regs company that might be a private building regs company in the future?
Yeah, we'll just get that answer.
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Sorry, Mr. Gould. Yeah, Yeah, so it's just a question about condition 12 about commencement. Who actually decides that all these conditions are met before commencement of site clearance and progression? Is that the council review?
Yes, so obviously where we place conditions on an approval, if it requires certain things to be discharged prior to commencement, then they would have to submit the details that the particular condition requires to the local planning authority, and then we would look at those and decide whether the information is acceptable. We might need to liaise with an external party, another organisation, maybe Natural England, or depending on what the issue is. But depending on the wording of the condition, if it's a pre-commencement condition, they would need to submit an application to the local planning authority, which we would have to discharge and approve before they could proceed.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair. I mean, we use a GIS system called StatMap, and we've got it open at the moment. And as is confirmed, we've got all the constraint layers running, and the area of the cliff top there is not showing to be any specific designation. There are other designations around, such as the one that I mentioned earlier to the south.
This is within 5 kilometers of heathlands.
Yeah. So the only one that is showing is just the impact for heathlands, which is obviously addressed by way of the unilateral undertaking. So we're not picking up any other specific designations in that zone.
And to Councillor Gillett's point about the different shadings.
Well, that's a different
Okay.
system that you're looking at. Environment Agency will obviously be looking at things like flooding and things like that. But we're looking at the system we've got, and it's got all the designations: triple SIs, SNCIs. We're not showing any specific designation in that area.
Okay, which would have hoped that it would have been picked up. So that clarifies. Okay, so if there's no Councillor Summon.
Sorry to be a pain. Just one more on the cliff stability, because I think in the report it talks about how it's compliant with the local plan when it comes to how close the development is to the edge of the cliff. I can't, and again, it's me doing a rubbish job of reading the report today. Are we definite that the impact isn't going to be, say, in 20 years' time, in 40 years' time? Because it sounds like the local plan stuff says that you've got to make sure the development is sound at the time of going in. But do we have any guarantees that in 80 years' time that this will still be, stable, solid, not affecting the cliff and all of that?
Ms. Waters.
Our engineers have looked at it. They will be looking at ensuring that it's safe for the lifetime of the development, which is typically around 100 years. So that will have been a part of the development. So I suppose there's two elements. There's the construction process itself, which is immediate, and the impact on the cliff during the construction process. But then, quite rightly, there's the longer term impact of the buildings physically being there, and the engineers will have considered both during the consultation process. As I said, they haven't raised an objection.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So if there's no further questions, if we can move to a debate then, please. Who wants to kick that off? Councillor Martin, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I actually really like this development. I particularly like the fact that it's two different designs for each block. It's not two blocks that are identical or even mirror images. They're completely individual, which is really, really nice. I like the idea of a central courtyard, which is very pleasant for people to come into. I really love the idea about that every flat's got a balcony or some outside space, which I think is really important, which I say at every meeting when it's flats. I think that's really, really important. Many years ago, I was looking for somewhere to live, to downsize, and I've got a cat, and just some sort of outside space is really, really important to people. I like how it's how the garden's divided by pathways. So when you've got many different flats in a building, the outside space is more likely to be used. The garden's more likely to be used because you've got pathways. You've sort of divided the garden up so people can go and sit outside there without feeling they've got to talk to somebody, or they can have their own private space if they want. It's very much in keeping with the street. I went there yesterday to have a look, and it's nearly all flats around there now, for as far as I could see. So it's very much in keeping. Not keen on the car lifts, but there are 2 of them, and it's vented, so not much I can do about that. As far as the concern about people coming from outside to live here, there are only 2 homes on that site at the moment. So there are going to be many more homes which we need in the area. We can't control whether people from outside buy property in the area. We've got no control over that. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it anyway. We're still creating more housing units. Does that make sense? So it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. To say, oh well, we'll not build anything because people from outside might come and live there. They're going to do it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm in favour of actually luxury housing in the area because it actually brings money to the area as well, which we desperately need. Businesses need money, and they need people to spend money. They need people that are going to set up businesses. So I'm not against luxury housing. I think it's really nice, and it's such a lovely area. It's a lovely home, lovely homes. I like the designs inside. They look a bit weird because some of it's sort of, like diagonal, which is, I was thinking, I'd hate to have to furnish a room like that, but it is what it is, yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Clements.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do agree largely with what Councillor Martin just said. I think it's a very attractive looking pair of buildings. I don't think it's overmassing or like a blot on the landscape at all. I think it's been very sensitively designed. I like the design. I'd like to say also that I think the case officer's presentation was excellent, very thorough and very informative, very helpful actually. And I appreciate that. And certainly the report is equally very, very thorough. I was a little bit concerned about some of those conditions when I first read those, but I do feel reassured by the officers that all of those will be completely, thoroughly and properly adhered to.
Thank you. I think Mr. Waters just wants to come in with some clarification. Mr. Gould.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just wanted to pick up on that point again that was raised by Councillor Ginnett around any special designations. Bit of a correction. We've fallen foul of the technology and the speed of the internet because of the GIS system that we use has multiple layers considering different things. We've been switching them on, but obviously they've been coming up on the screen very slowly. And so we've just had in the last minute or two the designation for the cliff face pop up that it is a triple SI. So that's a slightly scientific interest. But it's outside of the application site. It's the cliff face, that area there. So apologies for that, but the technology was just a bit behind the conversation.
Okay, so I think that clarifies it, Councillor Gillett.
So first of all, report very thorough, and concur that it matches the street scene. Though I'm not sure that's quite what the folk who had the local plan had in mind, that the properties would match the other flats in the area rather than the residential houses. I do still have a slight concern about the triple SI. If it's triple SI, not SNCI, it does appear that there are sort of paths that have been made a little bit along there where people have ingressed into that area. My thought with that is so that we don't increase the traffic in that area, it might be worth having a condition where we don't allow the 2 entrances at the back of the property, which then lead directly onto the path, which then can go on to triple SI, which would then mean that people would be able to access, because there's a few kind of like sandy paths that people have made trying to sort of cut down to the beach down there, which wouldn't be popular with the lizards. So that would be my thoughts in terms of potentially adding that as a condition, unless anyone's got any other thoughts.
Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Chair. I should also just note that Natural England have obviously looked at the scheme and haven't raised an objection. So they would have considered the impact on those special protected areas from a development like this.
And obviously, looking the aerial picture. So unless you went to their the pathway, the cliff does drop off there. So I don't think you can just make your own routes. There are designated routes, and I think the point would be taken. But I don't. Could we actually put a condition to say that on land outside to restrict that?
No, you couldn't put a condition on any permission to say you can't walk on the public footpath or, you know, any of those unmade tracks. Members have to consider, you know, whether adding the intensification of people into the area would be acceptable. And as I've said, Natural England have considered that, you know, and they're happy. Members would have the ability to control the boundary treatment, so to i.e. remove the gate that would afford access outside of the site, because you can control boundary because that's part of the development. But again, officers would probably advise that, you know, Natural England haven't seen this as a problem. So we wouldn't as officers recommend that, but it's within members' gifts as the decision maker to control the boundary treatment.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So, Councillor Pedovan?
Thank you. I agree with so much of what's been said by fellow members of this committee. I'm always a bit concerned when presenting officers or members of the planning department say, we've changed, you know, this was the original plan and we've changed it and we've got these improvements. Because my question always is, if this was being brought to us for the first time, would it be acceptable? And sometimes the answer is no. But in this case, for me, it definitely is yes. As lots of people have said, these are very much in keeping with the area. They're additional housing. I would love it if we were able to put a condition that they must be used for permanent homes, be it local people who already live in the area or people coming from outside. I'm not bothered either way on that, but permanent homes rather than holiday accommodation that are vacant quite a lot of the year. But we're not allowed to do that under the current legislation, so we have no powers to do that. I can imagine if developers came along, these developers or other developers came along with a proposal for this site for, you know, 2-bedroom, small houses, there would be an outcry that they were totally out of keeping with the area. And they would be, in my view. So in this case, I'm very happy to agree to this proposal. In fact, I'm willing to put the motion that we accept the officer recommendation to accept.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin, do you want to put it on the mic? On the mic, actually.
I'll second that, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Slade, did you want to? I know you were indicating.
I was only going to second it.
Councillor Rice?
I agree that I think it seems to be in keeping for that area, the sort of bulk of the buildings. I also agree that I would much rather not see luxury flats and more average housing that's more affordable. For me, it links into the whole car parking issue and the very expensive underground parking with lifts, which if that wasn't required, I could imagine that actually then we could have accommodation for people that's more affordable. So for me, this is a good highlight of the issues that we have of relying on private vehicles for our transportation. Is, do we want to spend huge amounts on and use up land for providing space for vehicles that are empty most of the time, or do we want affordable housing? But I realised that within the supplementary parking guidance, it does appear to say that we have to provide quite a lot of parking. so even if there was less parking, then you wouldn't need the expensive lifts. You could have a ramp instead of expensive lifts. But I am pleased to see that in the cycle parking some spaces for cargo bikes, which would be appropriate for families in this area to be able to access pretty much everything that they would need on a day-to-day basis. But I do feel that in a practical point of view, they're going to end up using the vehicle lifts because they're not going to be able to go through 2 doors on the ground floor to access the cycle lift and then come out the other door when it's not straight access. You're having to open a door, 2 doors, 3 doors to get into the cycle lift. So in terms of using a family cycle, well, that doesn't seem particularly well designed. Yes, that's probably all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Salmon.
So I don't like demolish and rebuild. I'm not keen on the lack of affordable housing, and despite all the reassurances, I wouldn't be keen on developing this close to the cliff edge and going underground like that. I wouldn't buy this house, but I don't think we've got any reasons to object in terms of planning policy. So I think we've got to support. So that's proposal to grant with all of the extra conditions. Yeah, I can't see any reason to vote against that.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Slade?
Can I just say that the powers are then delegated to head of planning?
Right, so Councillor Gould, yeah, I keep on promoting you, don't I? Mr. Gould, do you want to sum up?
Yes, just on that point, what would we be delegating to the head of planning? Sorry.
The conditions are all met.
Oh yeah, well that would be standard.
Okay.
If the application is approved, then the conditions say what they say, and if they have certain wording that makes them pre-commencement, the applicant would be duty bound to discharge those before they start work on site. If they don't, they could be subject to enforcement action.
Cool.
And Chair, could I just one more bit, but just a bit of housekeeping. If members are about to go to the vote, obviously, if I get this correctly, it's the motion on the table is to support the officer's recommendation, which is to grant. We've got a legal agreement that will cover the heathlands, and I'm not aware of any other changes to existing conditions in the report. I'm not aware of any additional conditions being suggested, but obviously just to note that there was an addendum sheet as well that had certain information in it, so that would form part of the approval.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So the proposal to approve has been made by Councillor Pedowin and seconded by Councillor Martin. So if you want to approve your application, show now, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favour.
And if you're against the application, show now. And if you are abstaining.
2 abstentions.
Okay, so that application has been approved as set out. Thank you. And that was the only item on the agenda, so that is the meeting closed. So thank you for your attendance.